Welcome to the Predictable Revenue Podcast, where sales leaders teach you what's working for them so you can build it yourself.
This episode of the Predictable Revenue Podcast is brought to you by our sales coaching and consulting services. Are you looking to create repeatable, scalable, and predictable revenue? We've helped thousands of companies grow their business with tailored expert advice backed by testing to ensure they establish the best practices that will work for them. Head over to bit.ly/predictable coaching to learn more.
Welcome back to the Predictable Revenue Podcast. I'm your host, Collin Stewart. Today, I'm joined by Gretchen Gordon. She's the author of best-selling book, The Happy Sales Manager. You can see it in the back there if you're watching us on video. She's also the founder and CEO of Braveheart Sales Performance. Today, we are talking about sales management. Gretchen, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Collin. I appreciate it. I'm glad to be here.
I'm happy to have you. I think one of the things that is most underinvested in a lot of sales organizations is sales management leadership training. It's kind of like that Far Side comic with the dog trying to catch the car. You know, every salesperson's goal is like, oh, I want to be sales manager. Then the dog catches the car and is like, okay, now what?
That is exactly it.
I'd love to start because this episode is for anybody who has just landed their first sales management role. We're going to talk about some of the skills and mindsets required for coaching, motivation, accountability, some of the things I've struggled with the most. If you've been in sales management for a while, this might be a great refresher. And if you're interested in getting into the role, this is what you can expect. So you know if this is actually a bumper you want to chase. I'd love to start with, help me understand, maybe talk to me a little bit about your first sales leadership role.
Okay, so bringing back all the scars, right? As typically happens, I was, a salesperson. I was the top performing salesperson in the company. And for a variety of reasons, the sales manager was moving into a different role. And so the president it was a division of a bigger company, asked me if I would step into the role. And my initial reaction was, yeah, but what does that exactly mean? And so I said, yeah, sure, I'll do it. But what I found was that I was far more confident doing the sales role and being successful there because I knew what I was doing. I, figured it out, so to speak. And I've had a mentor, that had helped me be more successful at it. So in this new role, all of a sudden I've become the boss of my former peers, which in and of itself is a little bit uncomfortable. That wasn't as big of an issue until one of the individuals wasn't really executing, was doing the wrong things, focused on the wrong opportunities. And all of a sudden this friend that I had, gone out to lunch with every day and, that type of thing, all of a sudden I'm having to, in my mind, what felt like reprimand, or scold. And that was fairly uncomfortable. But the bottom line was I just really didn't know what to do as a manager. So I didn't know how to coach and motivate and hold the person accountable or the people accountable to be as effective as possible. A lot of mental energy went into why doesn't she do that? And ignoring the guy over here who is maybe also not doing as good of a job as he could. So ultimately, I failed because I didn't know what to do. I didn't have the tools to know how to do it. I assumed that I should know what to do because I was tapped for the role. And I failed to the point that I went to the boss and said, I don't want to do this job. I want to go back to sales. And fortunately, I was permitted to do that. That wouldn't always be the case in a company. But I, at that point in my career, I never really dove into why it was that I was, feeling those inadequacy feelings and feeling so stressed and frustrated and losing my confidence. But yeah, I, after not a very long time period, said, nope, this isn't for me. I'm going back to sales.
I remember my bits and pieces of my, first couple of people that I had under, that I was, leading, coaching, the sales manager. And I think back to those conversations, and it was all tactics. Okay, let's listen to a call. Let's look at a call. What are you getting wrong? Okay, tactics. This is what you do. Let me just tell you what to do. But it's, while that might be a part of it, it seems like it's a small part of it. It seems much wider. So help me understand the big chunks that if I'm new and just sitting into this role, Collin 12 years ago, stepping into his first sales leadership role, what are the big pieces that I need to pay attention to?
Yeah, great question. And you're exactly right. That was probably my mistake as well, was focusing so much on the tactics, the tactical nature of it. Say this, do more of this. And not understanding what, why the other people didn't just know that. So I would say that, the kind of the big three are coaching, motivating, and holding individuals accountable. So let's just talk about coaching first. Coaching is frequently misunderstood and is not, what most salespeople have even experienced. So if you were a salesperson and then you got promoted into sales management, what happened to you as a salesperson probably wasn't coaching, because so few sales managers actually know how to effectively coach. And it's really, the basis of it is really helping others become better at their craft. So I think about a sales manager's job now, umpteen years later after the failure as a sales manager, being, the coaching aspect being helping, or let's say making sure that your role as manager is to help the other person become more successful in their role, better than they would be if you weren't helping them. And what I mean by that is not doing it for them, not telling them how to do it, but helping them grow their brain to learn that from their mistakes. So, maybe being alongside them and maybe listening to calls and planning for those calls and debriefing those calls. But instead of being the person that just says, well, do this, this works, do that, say this, you should have said that there, being more of an, an open listener and asking, so what are you going to do in this call? Why are you going to do that? What are you trying to accomplish? And getting the salesperson's brain involved. And then when you do debriefing, for instance, same concept. How do you think it went? What did you do well? Did you follow the things that you'd planned for? Why or why not? And so lots of, bringing into play a lot of the sales skills that hopefully the manager has acquired, but using them from the standpoint of trying to understand what's going on with the salesperson and where do they need some, additional focus to become the best they can be. So that's a little bit difference of opinion or difference of view than what I see a lot of salespeople that get promoted into management do. They just go, okay, well, I was really great at sales, so I'm just going to tell everybody to do it the way I do it. And they think that's coaching. Or deal specific coaching, like, hey, boss, what should I do? They said this. And instead of saying, well, say this or call them back or give them this, say, well, what do you think you should do? And, well, I don't know. That's why I came to you. Well, what do you think I would tell you to do? Again, engaging the brain. So that's a key fundamental component of effective coaching for salespeople that most people don't know how to do.
It seems like it's the most obvious and the most frustrating part I found is like, I know the answer. I just want to tell you the answer. They asked me for the answer. Why can't I just give them the answer? It's because you're not learning. You're not forced to engage, right?
Exactly. Well, the other thing is I see a lot of sales managers that get super frustrated, and maybe they've been doing it for a while, and they're just tired of, why can't these people get it? Why don't they understand it the way I understood it? I've told him, I've told Bob this 5 times and he keeps asking me the same question. Well, it's because you've turned yourself, if you're the sales manager, into being the answer man, like the open door, come in, ask me a question. What should I do, in this situation? The customer wants this. And then you tell them. And so frequently we think it's easier and quicker to tell them the answer. But in the long run, it's a huge time waster because they'll just keep coming back. And all of a sudden, you've hampered the growth of your organization and the growth of the people in the organization and, the actual revenue growth of the company if it's all dependent on the manager having all the answers and telling everybody what to do. So it's really, in the long run, it not only, it's the right thing to do to help the salespeople grow and become better, but it's also a time saver for the manager over the long haul.
Totally. When I was doing this, I just turned into a super AE where instead of being on one sales call, I was on 5, involved in 5 different salespeople's processes. And I was like, I feel like I'm just running everybody's opportunities. They're just coming to me for advice because I just kept telling them, you do this, you do that. And I was the guy sitting at the switchboard, but I wasn't building a team that could, I was building their reliance on me. I wasn't building a team that was self-reliant, so to speak.
Yeah, that's really, really a common thing that we see. And so what you really want to do is build independently successful salespeople, right? Not successful salespeople because of the manager, totally dependent on the manager pulling all the levers and, telling them what to do. You're exactly right. Well, and you mentioned the word process too, which is, is a key, I would say, more tactical component of success. But the reason I want to hit on it right now with regard to coaching is that let's make the assumption that there is a sales process that is predictive of results. And it will provide not only the salesperson, know what to do, when to do it, what questions to ask, where to go, all that kind of stuff in a sales conversation, but it also makes it very, I guess I would say, long-standing, or it reinforces or makes it so that the manager has something to coach to if we are all playing from the same map, so to speak, the same process. So if the manager can also integrate their coaching into the sales process. So what did they say when you asked them this question? Oh, well, I didn't ask them that question. Oh, well, did you not ask them because you didn't know, because you weren't following the process? You didn't know to ask the question? Or did you not ask the question because you were nervous about asking the question? And that's the type of coaching that is really valuable for a manager to give within the process or within the framework of the sales process that's being used. So, because you said the word, I just had to go off on a tangent about it. Sorry.
I love it. I do want to kind of follow you down this tangent. When you're putting together, say you're working with a client and they say, hey, I want to rebuild the sales process. Do you do call plans? Where you map out exactly these questions for exactly these calls? Is it sort of one continuum, and however far you get for each, in each conversation, how do you like to organize that?
Yeah, my experience has been, if you are working from a particular, let's say, selling system, so there's a common language about like, okay, I need to know why the customer is talking to us, why might they buy, how compelling is that reason? And then maybe understanding what the economic impact of doing something is, or the economic impact of not doing something. What are the consequences of not doing something? And then how are the decisions made? I mean, let's just use that as a basic system. So who's involved in the decisions? How do they make decisions? what resonates with them, of how they might decide to use a provider versus another. Would they leave their current provider? Those types of things. So let's assume that we have at least, that's a basic framework. You could argue there's different pieces and parts to it, but let's just say that's a framework of a sales system or a selling system. What I like to do is lay that out in, kind of the continuum, and say, okay, if we're starting here and we want to end over here, we want to end at a resolution of they're either going to do business with us or they're not, then what questions do we need to ask in that first section to understand why they're even talking to us and how compelling their situation might be to do something about it, and then move along. That's just maybe my sequential thought process, but doing it in a way that then, no sales conversation goes exactly sequentially. So those are the key elements that you want to learn, that you're trying to uncover, but it might not happen. You don't go from point A to B to C to D to E. So giving, the framework is very helpful, but helping the individual salespeople understand that, sometimes things do go off on a tangent. So it's very helpful to understand what your sales process is, to know, okay, what do I know and what do I need to know? And then, you can pick back up where you were. And that also gives the sales manager the ability to, go, what do you know and what do you need to know to figure out if you should spend any more time with this opportunity.
Totally. It's so easy to fall into checklist mode when you have, these are the questions, these are the 7 to 15 questions I got to answer or ask in this call. And I've heard reps, my reps doing this, and reps I've coached doing this. And what's your advice for getting out of checklist mode?
So it's really, instead of being in checklist mode, being in really taking the prospect, let's say, and thinking about what is it that their problem is. So if we can really get the reps to understand, we're only here in the sales world to help others achieve their goals, right? I mean, obviously, we want to sell our stuff and we want to make money and we want the company to grow and all that type of stuff. But it doesn't happen unless you truly have the belief that I'm here to help the other person or the company, or the person, representing the company, get what they need, get what they want, solve their problem, accomplish their goals, avoid something in the future. So if we can have that as the overarching mechanism, instead of just, I need to answer these questions. Anybody can have a checklist. And I mean, heck, you could send the checklist to the prospect, right? And have them answer the questions. But it's the nuance of what do those questions mean in the context of what the client or the prospect is trying to accomplish or needs to accomplish. And so I think it's a great idea to have a list of questions, but the salesperson also has to use their brain, because not every situation is going to be covered by, question 1 and then question 2 and then question 3. What we need to be doing is teaching our salespeople to use their brain to think about, okay, well, why? Frequently it's the why question that is way more important than the question that might be on their cheat sheet, I guess I would say. So why did they answer that way? Why is that important? Why are you even trying to solve this problem? That's, I think, how you can get away from that checklist mentality.
Love it. If we come back to coaching, there's some skills required. There's the mindset kind of shift that needs to happen first. And I think, as you pointed out, it's the mindset shift from, I'm going to tell you the answer, to a true coach is going to help you discover the answer on your own. I'm trying to paraphrase you. Did I get that right?
Yeah, that's exactly right. And to expound on the mindset question, which the book is designed to, tackle both tactical and, the skill sets and the mindsets. And to your point, there are tactical things to do in coaching, kind of tried and true, and exactly what you said. What we're trying to do is help the salesperson discover the answer for themselves so that they become better the next time, so they learn and grow. And so at a fundamental level, the sales manager needs to make the shift from it's all about me to it's all about the team. And that can be a difficult shift it's not unusual. So it can be a difficult shift for a salesperson who was very successful in sales to now be promoted into sales management to just, switch on a dime and now care more about the success of each of the individuals on their team than they care about their own personal success. So I would say at the core, that's really the deep-seated belief that successful sales managers need to grow or adopt or just come to the table with. And it can be learned. It doesn't have to be innate. It's not necessarily innate.
And we've talked about some of the skills and sort of the running the one-on-ones or running your check-ins, your pipe reviews, and sort of like planning, listening, debriefing, asking them the questions. What are some other skills or tactics that might be helpful for somebody who's trying to work on their coaching ability?
Yeah. So one of the things that we see, along with all those things, planning, appropriate planning, and along with planning, I would say would be being comfortable helping the sales reps practice. And it doesn't have to be a great, big, long role play. Everyone, hates those two little words, role play. But it can be as simple as, okay, so if the prospect says this, what are you going to say? So it can just be little mini practices. So that's part of the preparation, planning and preparation part. Observing without participating, or observing a sales call without jumping in and taking over is a tactical skill that is not easy for a lot of salespeople turned sales managers to do. It's hard, right?
No, I'm perfect at it. Never starting with that at all.
Well, and the thing is that, inside you're like, no, just say this. And so you jump in, right? As the sales manager. It's not that's not uncommon. So I think what helps is if a sales manager understands that there are some sales calls where maybe your title is necessary. Maybe we're bringing you, you need to come in because they're bringing a higher level person in on the other side. But what has to happen in those, you still have to plan it, right? What is my role as the manager compared to the rep? I don't want to undermine the rep and their skills. I want to be there to support them and maybe in title alone, and so the rep has to take control and plan the meeting. But I think what we have to understand is that is one type of joint sales call. Another is purely for coaching purposes. And that is where the sales manager, it has to be set up that like, hey, sales managers here, kind of along for the fun because this is just part of our culture. We all like to get better, continuous growth. And he or she's going to, give me some feedback and make sure that I'm taking care of you just right, Mr. Customer, Mr. Prospect. And so that's if we can make that distinction, then I think it can be easier for a manager to sit back and observe and then do the coaching afterwards, which is the debriefing. And, I believe that managers should be doing that on a regular basis, not just participating in the joint calls where they need to speak up, but also in those joint calls where they can be just an observer and give feedback and help the salesperson grow their craft. So I would say those are some core areas of coaching. But one of the things that we haven't talked about is pipeline management. Can we talk about that a little bit?
Oh, all day long.
I think this is like near and dear to your heart too, isn't it?
It might be, yeah.
Yeah. I find that sales managers, ineffective sales managers, let's say, or inexperienced sales managers have a tendency to do pipeline review in a sales meeting with everybody, because there's this belief that's gone back for years and years and years that if you make a sales rep uncomfortable in a sales meeting because they don't have enough great stuff in their pipeline, that then they'll, go work harder, and next week they'll come back and be able to talk about all these great opportunities that they're working on. I have in practice not seen that operate that way. What we typically see is that there are some sales reps, salespeople who talk about the same deal over and over and over again. And it's like, okay, enough already, close it or make it go away. And then we have other people who oversell, the likelihood of closing this piece of business because they want to look like a hero. So when we place too much emphasis on pipeline management in a group setting, it causes the psychological thought process to be, oh, having a big, robust pipeline is the most important thing. When in reality, closed business is the most important thing, and the pipeline is just that's a way station on the way to closed business. So what I'm a proponent of is that coaching takes place in an individual coaching session with the sales rep. And depending on whether you sell great big stuff, so you only have a few opportunities in the pipeline, or you sell not great big stuff and you have a bunch of opportunities in different stages in the pipeline, will dictate how you go through the pipeline. And if you can set it up this way, either we're just going to talk about, what are the 2 opportunities this week that you are going to move, or what are the 5 opportunities this week that you're going to move, and what are you going to do that? That's a great way to focus on it. But if, for whatever reason that doesn't fit the circumstances, one of the best things that a manager can do on the pipeline management side is just run through all or some of the opportunities and say, okay, what's the agreed to next step for this opportunity? And when is that supposed to happen? And it can't be, well, they're going to check and then I'm supposed to call them back in a couple weeks. That can't be it. It has to be an agreed upon next step. Like we have an appointment, or, I'm sending the proposal and they're going to meet with me at 10 o'clock. I'm sending it by Monday and they're going to meet with me by 10 o'clock on Tuesday or something like that.
Mm-hmm. I love that. I definitely broke one rep doing a public pipeline review. And 100% my fault, not the rep's fault. As you were describing this, it's like, yep, I remember the time and place, and it was like downhill from there. It didn't, it was me being being an inexperienced manager, not a great manager. It wasn't a great experience for the rep. And I feel bad for him. It was kind of what drove me to get a lot better, is the realization of like, this is not helping. I thought it was helping. But in hindsight, it was kind of like a shame-based approach to sales management of like, hey, this guy's got all this pipeline. What have you got? Oh, nothing? Feel shame because you're not as good as the other rep. Obviously, in hindsight, that's not going to work out super well.
Well, and that was the old school way of doing it. I mean, and so if you think about it, thank you for sharing that, you're like, okay, I recognize that wasn't the best thing. But you didn't probably know any better, right? It's probably what you'd experienced, right?
Yep.
And so it's like, okay, this is just the way you do it. And if you think about it, it's like this tribal knowledge. It just gets passed down from, well, that's the way we did it. So that's the way, it happened to me as a salesperson. And so now that's how I'm going to do it when I'm a manager. And, kudos to you for kind of breaking the chain of, ineffectiveness, I guess I would say. But that makes the whole point which is what you kind of started with, which is too frequently, I should say, the sales managers are not really taught how to do this effectively. And it's different than just regular old management, training. It's sales management, which is very different. I mean, there are components of regular old coaching and management, but it's that plus. And that's a lot of the reason why I wrote the book, frankly. And that's a lot of the reason why we exist as a company, is because we know that sales managers are really the linchpin of success in a sales organization. And so little effort is placed on making sure that they're having the right impact on the sales team, that those types of things happen. So that's that's kind of the long and short of what we try to help managers with. They just don't know what they don't know because they've never done it before, right?
100%. And you're trying your best to work with the reps. Some reps take to it right away. Some reps don't. And I don't know, the gears to like, hey, it seems like they're picking this up, or you know what, the chains kind of run off as spool. I found it can come down to like motivation of like, do I know the motivation? Do I not know the motivation? Because if I'm trying one set of tactics on this rep or I'm trying to like, coach them from one perspective, but I don't know how they see the world and like what really gets them going, then it can be really hard. You feel like you're, I don't know, blindfolded and trying to like thrash around in the dark to try and find something. I'd love to understand your sort of like your thoughts on, that mindset so that we can help kind of them put it all together.
Yeah. And I'm glad you brought that up. So let me ask you a question. When you were a rep, would you say that you were money motivated? Were you motivated to be, compensated more?
No, not at all. I was I was a great and terrible rep at the same time. My first year at almost every job, I was well over quota. And then the second year I was bored and I was looking for something else. So I'm very much interesting work motivated. Like I loved learning about diesel generators and all the different things. And that was like the super, super fun part. And then I was year 2 and I was like, I don't really love this as much.
I learned it. I know it. I'm kind of bored.
Exactly.
Okay, perfect. You actually are proving part of my case that I want to make, which is you are a little bit of an anomaly, except not today. So if you were a rep today, that would be super common. The majority, and people that are listening may not believe this, but the majority of sales people today are not motivated for just the money, the rewards, the recognition, or extrinsically motivated. And what I've found is that, people maybe of my generation or folks who've been in sales for a number of years and stayed in sales because of the money and the recognition, and now they're the manager, they don't recognize always that people aren't motivated the same way that they were. So they might have, as the manager, might have been motivated by, oh, I can make more money if I sell more. And so that, drove them. Or I'm going to have my name on the top of the tote board, recognition. I'm going to win the trip. I'm going to, whatever it is, right? And the majority of folks today are not. And I find it really interesting that an awful lot of managers have a really hard time understanding that, have a really hard time absorbing that and believing that. And actually, we saw a big change after the recession, 2007, 2008, 2009, in motivation types. So it used to be that a lot of salespeople were very heavily extrinsically motivated. And that, the Great Recession kind of had a big impact on that because it caused people to go, oh, wait a minute, money isn't everything. I have my health, that kind of thing. And I think the pandemic has probably done a little bit of that again, except people are just like so sick of, just all the stuff associated with the pandemic that it's like, I want business as usual. And what I've noticed in, the looking at the data of salespeople is that too few managers understand how to get the salesperson to, act like they acted, like, just do whatever you need to do to make as much money as possible or get the rewards or the recognition or, whatever. And so many people today are more like you described, Collin, which are you're doing it for your own reasons. You're really fascinated by learning about this stuff, learning why the customers might use it, that kind of thing. And then you hit a ceiling and you're not that interested anymore. Well, you're intrinsically motivated. You're motivated for your own reasons. And if more than 50% of the people today in the sales ranks are intrinsically motivated, then the manager has to understand, well, what does that mean? What actually gets them out of bed in the morning? What actually gets them going? The compensation plan isn't going to do it. What's going to do it is understanding what actually matters to them and then coaching them to be able to accomplish that. So, to use your example, you said, okay, maybe a year in, I'm, crushing my goals. And then I'm like, okay, what's next? If your manager would have had a, maybe intimate conversation with you about what actually mattered to you and what you're striving for, what are your big life goals? What are you on this planet to accomplish? And I know that sounds a little woo-woo and squishy, but that's really the level of understanding that a manager could have to help the individuals on their team do and become, do the most and become the best they can be. And it makes everybody's life easier if you can tie back whatever their daily work is, make more calls, close more business, do more proposals, whatever it is, to whatever their personal goals are. And that's really how I like to address motivation. One of the biggest findings that we see about sales managers is the vast majority of them don't think it's part of their job to motivate the people on their team. And I don't know exactly the reason for that, but my gut tells me it's because they didn't need to be that motivated. And that's why they're now promoted to manager, but not everybody's in the same boat on their team.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm a big believer in big goal management, goal planning, and not just sales goal planning, but personal goal planning, and that the manager can help, a salesperson accomplish what they want in life.
So if this is something that somebody hasn't done before, sitting down in a one-on-one and just saying, so what do we put on this planet to accomplish? Seems like that could be a tough ask. What would you recommend some ways of bringing up that conversation to help get that motivation going or help get the conversation about motivation started?
Yeah. So you're exactly right. It can feel really uncomfortable, especially if you've been manager and salesperson, if that relationship's been in existence for a while, it can feel really weird to go, okay, now I want to talk about your personal goals. Can you share with me, what is it that you want to accomplish? That seems unrealistic. So it really has to start at a more foundational level, which is a relationship and understanding the person, knowing, having the manager and the salesperson having an open relationship to the point that, the sales manager knows them, knows something more than they show up for work at 8 or 8:30 and they do their job and, we talk about sales and that's all. So it requires a little bit of personal interaction beyond just the job. And once you've established a bit of rapport and you've established trust, and you can't force people to trust you. You have to earn it. And you do that through your actions and your deeds and, the way you talk to people. And so it needs to start with, I want you to be as successful as possible, and having that as a foundation first in the job, getting to know them then personally, and then being able to say, hey, I'm aware that people that, are goal driven, have goal plans, and are keeping themselves, holding themselves accountable to those plans, are more successful in achieving the goals. So where you can earn trust and have credibility in this regard is that the sales manager has to do the work with their own personal goals. Like, what do they want? And how does this job fit into it? And then sharing that like, hey, this is where I'm headed and this is what I want. And this is where this is how I see my job fitting into that. I want you to have the same benefit. So can we, kind of dive in? I want to help you accomplish your goals and your dreams. And I think the job can be part of that. But you have to build the bridge first of trust, and you have to build a personal relationship, and then you can take it to that more intimate level.
Yeah, I think that's something I didn't get to with a couple of my previous sales managers, which was they're like, I just don't understand why this guy doesn't care about money. Like, he made so much money last year. He did so well. What's going on this year? And it's not that I had like taken a nosedive. I just wasn't as happy, as engaged. And I think for them, it was like they're in the dark because you don't understand what motivates people. And so they were trying things based on, okay, well, you think, I think money is this person's motivator. Okay, so I'm gonna play these cards, and I'm gonna go try and bring in the conversations this direction. The thing that I think I maybe lacked the most was accountability as a rep. Of like, I think I got a lot of freedom and flexibility because I was usually the top rep, and so I maybe chafed a little bit under accountability. And I think certainly it was one of the biggest things I struggled with as a new sales leader, was holding reps accountable. I just didn't understand why people weren't just automatically great salespeople.
Yep.
Why don't you care? And I think motivation helps, and I think the coaching helps. But the accountability is where the rubber meets the road. So I'd love your thoughts on like the mindset that goes into, holding reps accountable to goals.
Yeah, no, I think that's they kind of go hand in hand. It's a great, you can have all the motivation in the world, but if someone isn't held accountable to whatever they need to do to accomplish their goals, for instance, then it frequently doesn't happen. I think about managers can operate in the role of accountability partner. So not being the crack the whip. What I find a lot of times, especially new managers, they either are having a hard time getting out of the friend zone, like we're buddies and we're going out drinking after work. That's what we used to do. To, I got to crack the whip and I got to, hold your feet to the fire and that type of thing. And frequently, the example that you said, like, you were the top rep, so the manager left you alone, right? You just and it's like, okay, well, I'm the top rep. Why? Talk to them. Right. They're not carrying the load.
Totally. I've already beat my quota for the year. What are you giving me shit about?
Right. Why are you talking to me?
Right. Because you could do 200 and 2 to 3 times this. But anyway.
Right. Exactly. That's exactly right. And so the manager has to get comfortable with that unlimited potential, or the unlimited upside, or, greater upside of all of the people on their team. And everybody needs to be managed individually. So I always say that about motivation. People need inspired individually, or motivated individually. It's not just a broad brush, like, okay, we're going to have everybody, if you do more, you're going to get this. That doesn't necessarily work for everybody. So the accountability piece comes in is, so if you go back to my comment about understanding the goals that the individual rep has, not just the sales goals, but the sales goals, or the objective of how much business the sales rep is going to close, absolutely ties directly into personal goals. So it could be, it could be a, kind of a, what do I want to say? Monetary reason. I want to remodel my kitchen. Okay, well, how much money do you need to do that? Okay, then it's very simple to go, well, I need to close this much business because I need to it's going to be $60,000. So I need to save this much. So I need to make this much more. So then you can work backward on the quote unquote math of success, which is, okay, how much business do I need to close? And what's my closing ratio? So how many first meetings or discovery meetings do I need to have to predict success that I'm going to close that much? Okay, so what activities am I going to do to generate enough of those first meetings to, make sure that it all flows through? And that's where the accountability comes in. And that's why these two are very much intermingled. So if we find out that the person wants to remodel their kitchen and they need to make $60,000, and so, it's going to cost them $60,000. So they want to make $60,000 more because they were, taking care of other stuff. Then you break that down and go, well, you need to sell X number of additional pieces of business. And how are you going to work through that? So then when the sales rep is, okay, well, that means I'm going to do, I'm going to do 20 of these a week, and I'm going to do 50 of these a week, and I'm going to do 10 of these, and whatever they are, asking for a referral, cold calling, following people on LinkedIn that have left clients and, gone someplace else, whatever it might be, right? To get new opportunities, then you can easily help the salesperson as the manager. You can help the salesperson understand when they're not going to reach their own personal goal. So that's why accountability and motivation are tied together, in that if the person needs to make $60,000 additional to pay for their kitchen, and that means they need to have, 5 more sales, discovery meetings a week or a month, depending on, how big the sales are. If they're not doing the activity to generate those first appointments, then it's super easy for the sales manager to say, hey, Collin, you said you wanted to remodel your kitchen and it was going to take this much to do it. And that meant you needed to have, these many more first meetings. And you said your plan was you were going to do, 10 of these, and 20 of these, and 50 of these. And I see, that you've kind of fallen short on that. Or you can just ask, did you do that? Okay, well, if you didn't do it, why not? And what are you going to do differently next week? Because I want you to get your kitchen remodeled. And that's where motivation and accountability fall in together. And that's really where the manager can be what I termed the accountability partner, as opposed to the crack the whip. You need to make more calls. You need to do this, right? So that's why they are so closely connected.
I love that. It seems like a really common theme throughout this is less telling, more questions. Is that a fair way to summarize the whole, like, how to not be terrible at sales management?
Yeah. So we could have done this in about 30 seconds, and we could have just said that, right? Don't tell, ask questions. Similar to sales, right? So that's where a newly minted sales manager can fall back on their good questioning skills, but just direct them in a different way. Ask the rep more questions instead of telling the rep what to do. Just like as a salesperson, you would ask your prospect more questions instead of telling them why they need to buy the stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
I totally agree. I mean, sales in that light, sales is more about the questions that you're asking and the timing and the quality of the timing and of the question than it is necessarily about any script or pitch or anything you could say about the company. And sort of that's the parallel to sales management. It's about when and where you ask the question.
That's exactly right. And having the, like you said, when to ask the question, how to phrase it, that type of thing. You've learned that through building some type of relationship with the prospect or the customer. So you've done that through certain level of questioning. It's no different from sales manager to salesperson, asking the right questions at the right time by understanding the uniqueness of that particular salesperson.
I love it. Gretchen, I want to thank you for coming on and sharing a little bit from the book, sharing a little bit of your personal experience. I did want to land with, obviously, tell me, I'd love to hear a little bit about the book, and I'd love to hear a little bit about Braveheart.
Oh, sure. So the book is, as we've mentioned, is The Happy Sales Manager. And so I wrote the book, probably from the experience of what I shared earlier, being a failed sales manager and then, learning how to do it better. And my company, Braveheart Sales Performance, has been around since 2009. And we've worked with hundreds, if maybe not thousands, of sales managers. And we've seen the good, the bad, and the ugly. And so we know what works. And frequently it's not, as we said at the very beginning, just the tactics of how to do it. It's the combination of the skills and the mind and the heart, really, that create the best combination. But so many sales managers were promoted into the role, not given any training, not really given any guidance, and they lose their confidence. They get stressed out. They feel frustrated. They do what I did, which was I'm going back to sales. I mean, ultimately, I learned how to be a manager, but what we're trying to do is really save those, those lacking confidence, those that don't know what to do, don't know where to turn, and turn them into happy sales managers. So that's the story of the book. And it's, kind of the type of work that we do at Braveheart Sales Performance. We work with sales teams and the managers that lead them, individually coach managers that lead those teams, help them with process and playbooks and improved qualifying, using, systematic approaches to those things to make everybody's job easier, more fulfilling, and to help organizations grow sales. So the book is kind of a culmination of a lot of the work that we've done with managers over the last 14 and a half years.
Wow. And thank you for sharing. I'll throw a link to the Happy Sales Manager in the show notes, as well as to Braveheart Sales. If people are looking to get in touch, what's the best way?
Probably the easiest way is to just email me or LinkedIn. So Gretchen Gordon on LinkedIn, and it's Gretchen Gordon Braveheart at LinkedIn. And my email is Gretchen, GRETCHEN at braveheartsales.com.
Love it. Gretchen, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thanks, Collin. I appreciate it. It was fun.
It was definitely fun. And thanks to everybody for listening. We'll see you all next week.